Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amanda. I am 37 years old. I have two little kids, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I typically make working mom content here on YouTube. Today's video is going to be a little different. I am gonna be talking about quitting alcohol after 20 years of drinking. I'll be going through why I am quitting drinking, everything that's kind of led up to this moment, the way that I used to drink in the past when I was in college and in my 20s, and how my lifestyle has just shifted and I'm a mom now, and the way that my body has started to metabolize alcohol is very different now than it was back in the day in my 20s. And today when I'm talking to you, I have not drank alcohol in 60 days. So I'm just gonna quickly touch on a few of the things that I've noticed and a little bit about my journey, but I'll go into more detail in a separate video on my first 30 days without alcohol and then 60 days without alcohol. And going forward, I will continue to update you on my journey. I've also set a goal for myself. I am not going to drink for an entire year. So if you are on board with that, then follow along, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and come along with me. Let's do this together. You might be surprised why I have decided to quit drinking. So let's get into that first and foremost. The reason why I've quit drinking is probably not the typical reason that you might think. I am not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem with alcohol, but let's start in the beginning. And I just want to tell you briefly about my relationship with alcohol back when I was kind of in my early drinking years. So when I first started drinking, I was probably around 16 or 17 years old. Kids in my high school were drinking. I remember that there would be like Sunday night parties where kids would go to somebody's house and they would, you know, take their parents' alcohol, or maybe they had a sibling that could buy it for them. And so it was very typical. I would say most people that I was friends with and that I went to school with, high school with, drank alcohol. And so of course I did too. We would take alcohol from my parents. I remember taking bottles of vodka and filling them up with water so that my parents wouldn't know. I had a couple of friends that had older siblings. They would get us alcohol. I was friends with some random guys from other towns that either friends of mine were dating, or I don't know, we met them somehow, and they were drinking and would bring us alcohol. They're a little older than us. We would go to different parties in different towns, and I always thought it was so fun. Like, I had the absolute best time when I was drinking, and I was drinking to get drunk. I felt like I had superpowers. I was so funny. I was the life of the party. I would do shots. I would make crazy mixed drinks. Like, we would do crazy stuff together with my friends. And I don't know, I really, really loved to drink. I didn't drink good stuff by any means. I remember me and my friend, we used to go down to Cape May in New Jersey every summer, and we were drinking like Smirnoff Ices and just really random stuff that we could get our hands on. And I just remember drinking a couple of Smirnoff Ices and being like, oh my gosh, I'm so tipsy, blah, blah, blah. I probably wasn't, but it was just like the thrill of it. I was underage, so, you know, everybody, I feel like so many people have the same experience as me, and it was just a fun thing to do. You were kind of going behind your parents' back a little bit. I remember I would have sleepovers at my house, and we would go to this Dunkin' Donuts, and I would get these lemonade culottes and come back to the house and pour vodka in there. And then so many times I would just get so, because I didn't know how to handle my alcohol. I didn't know when to stop. I didn't know when was too much. I would drink a lot of it at once, like hard liquor, and I would just get really drunk and then feel sick and I would throw up. So for a while, I was drinking these culottes from Dunkin' Donuts, and I would be throwing up in the bathroom the next morning. And then I told my mom that it was the culottes. She's like, why are you drinking those damn culottes? You know they make you sick. What is wrong with you? And it wasn't the culottes, it was the alcohol, obviously. So anyway, that was kind of my early drinking years. Had a lot of fun. I would only drink like on the weekends or occasionally when we were able to get the alcohol or if we were going to a party. Then I went to college. College was, I was getting pretty drunk. We were drinking, you know, Thursday through Sunday, going pretty hard. I remember I would just be ripping shots and having a great time. Vodka was my drink of choice. I wasn't really into beer. I would drink beer or like shotgun a beer and play a lot of beer pong, play a lot of flip cup. I loved all the drinking games. Oh my gosh. Relay, oh, that was one of my absolute favorite drinking games. So college was a freaking blast. I mixed Hawaiian punch. I would get this blue Hawaiian punch and mix it with vodka, and I couldn't taste it. I was drinking the shittiest vodka ever. It was like that Burnett's nasty shit. And I like the grape one for whatever reason. But yeah, I was having a good time. That kind of, you know, it was the college party years. I was getting drunk a lot, but had no issues, you know, would jump out of bed the next morning, have, you know, chug some water, chug some Gatorade. I would go to class on a Friday morning and my life was great. I was having the best time, no problem whatsoever. Same going into when I graduated from college. I was working in New York City and we would go to happy hour, you know, on a Thursday and a Friday. I was going down the shore. Me and my friends had a shore house. So we were going and getting drunk on the weekends, like doing happy hour at DJs down the shore and just drinking through the night. And I, you know, had a great time. It was the best. Like, never had issue. I mean, I was hungover sometimes, but nothing that a greasy, you know, piece of pizza or chicken nuggets and French fries couldn't fix, and coffee, whatever. Had no problem, had the best time of my life. There were a few instances where I probably drank too much and I was throwing up the next day. I was binge drinking, like, let's be honest. I was definitely drinking like more than 4 drinks in a night, but it was only on the weekend. I wasn't drinking when I got home from work on the weekdays unless it was a happy hour. There were some occasions, like I used to brown out a lot. Like I wouldn't fully black out so much, but I would have brownouts where I would remember most of the night, but there were periods where I couldn't really remember, and like a friend would be talking about it the next day and be like, oh, you did this and that, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't even remember, or I don't remember that conversation, or I don't remember doing that. But everybody did it, you know, like I wasn't the only one that was browning out, blacking out. You know, we're in our early to mid 20s, like having so much fun, no responsibilities. You know, I was in the city, like it was, you know, we went to cocktails on rooftops and it was just so fun. There were times when there were a few instances where I would be drinking in the city and I would get on either the bus to go home or the train, and I would just pass out because I was so like tired and drunk, and I missed my stop a couple times, and that was very scary for me because, you know, I'm at the end of the bus line in a place that I've never been before. The bus driver is waking me up and I'm like, I have no freaking clue where the heck I am. I have to call my mom. My mom would have to come, like drive, you know, 40 minutes away to come pick me up. And so I did irresponsible things like that, that every 20-year-old, mid-20s does. Okay. So that was kind of the way that I was. I would drink to get drunk. I certainly was not really drinking in a, you know, casual social atmosphere. I mean, my friends and I would go to dinner or something like that, and we would have a couple glasses of wine or a cocktail at dinner, but then we would usually go out afterwards and rip shots and drink vodka sodas and vodka Red Bulls and all that other stuff and have so much fun. I loved that time in my life for drinking. I was always like the life of the party. I was always having fun. Sometimes you can ask some of my Jersey girlfriends, sometimes I would get like a little angry. Like during this time, me and Pete, my husband now, but my boyfriend back then, we were in a long distance relationship and it was very tumultuous. Like he was in law school in Indiana. I was in New York City. I was going out a lot. He was going out a lot. There was a lot of like, do I trust him? What are you doing tonight? And I remember a lot of times where I would have like you know, drunk in texts and saying things that I didn't mean. He was saying things. And so I could get in like a mood, and the alcohol obviously just like made it worse. And I took things that he said the wrong way, and I shouldn't have been texting him when I was drinking, and he was worried about what I was doing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, moving on to kind of like the third leg of my drinking career. And I would say that was early 30s, because I got married, I think I was 30 years old when I got married. And then the next leg of my drinking career was when I had kids. And I continued after I had Chase. I think I had Chase, I was 30, and then I like just 2 weeks after he was born, I turned 31. So I continued to drink, not heavily, but definitely more in a social capacity, like going out with friends for dinner, having a few drinks. Me and Pete were in the habit of staying up on a Friday night and making martinis and enjoying ourselves and stuff like that. And you know, that obviously stopped while I was pregnant, but once I had Chase, I was kind of back on the wagon. But having a newborn, having little kids is a totally different ballgame. And there were, I literally think it almost took me about 5 years to realize that you just can't drink and have little kids and responsibilities the way that I was. And I wasn't like blacking out or anything like that. I was having, you know, a few martinis on a Friday night, you know, Sunday fun day, sitting outside, having some wine. Saturday night, the same thing, a couple glasses of wine. But you know, you don't bounce back the way that you did when you were in your 20s and you could sleep as long as you wanted, and you could get up and lounge around the house and do nothing if you had a hangover. Like when you have kids, those just really aren't options. And so I would say for the first few years, until Quinn was maybe 1 or 2, I continued the same patterns. I drank more than I should have, and I was suffering with really bad hangovers. I literally couldn't drink without getting hungover. And fast forward that, I continued to do that until Quinn was maybe like 1. And I noticed after I had Quinn that the way that I don't know if it was my body chemistry or the way that I metabolize alcohol, something changed where I started to be very depressed after I would drink. And in the beginning, it was like, okay, I had a few espresso martinis. And then I was hungover the next day and sad and depressed for a few days. But I was like, okay, maybe my body just doesn't like the espresso martinis. Then I would, you know, cut down on those and drink regular martinis. Those were a little bit better. I didn't have too much of a depression, still was hungover. Then I was like, maybe I should just stop drinking the hard stuff altogether, or maybe just have one drink and leave it at that. So I tried that for a while, seemed to be working. I was still drinking, you know, probably every weekend, but not having a lot. And then I thought that I love wine. Like my favorite wine is a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It is my absolute favorite drink aside from like a dirty martini. But then I would start having these hangovers and depression after I would drink like 2 to 3 glasses of wine. So then I was like, well, maybe it's the sugar. Why am I having such a headache like the next few days? So then I switched to like 0 sugar or low sugar wines. The hangovers were better, but I was still feeling these like negative effects a few days after I would drink. So that brings me to kind of this past year, maybe the past year and a half. And I started to realize that every time I drank, even if it was 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine over a period of 6 hours, I would feel sad and depressed for 3 to 4 days afterwards. And I was in this cycle of drinking on the weekends and then taking, you know, 3 to 4 days to get back to baseline on Thursday. And then I feel great on Thursday, I get up, I work out early in the morning, I'm feeling really good finally, and then it's Friday. And Friday, I would feel like having a couple glasses of wine, and then maybe Saturday I would have a couple glasses of wine. And so like I tried to limit my alcohol a lot. So in this past year, I really just like, if it wasn't a party or a celebration, those kind of things like Christmas and the holidays and birthdays, I still had a few more drinks, but for the most part, I had been drinking in the past year only when I would go out to dinner with like a group of friends. So if we would go out like once a month for parents' night out, like our daycare does, I would have maybe 1 drink or 2 drinks, and that was like it. So I had been doing that for a good amount of time, but I still noticed that even a couple of drinks once a month, I was feeling really depressed. I was feeling sad. I was feeling regretful. I would go into situations where I was worried about drinking. I was anxious about drinking. I felt like a social pressure to drink. Then on top of that, just this looming dread that I knew that I was gonna feel the next morning, that I was gonna sleep in, I wasn't gonna get up, I was gonna feel shitty the next day, like some sort of a hangover, sluggish, dull headache, wanting to eat really greasy food and bad for you food, and then the depression, like the sadness, I don't even know. And I tried for probably about a year or so doing this, and it just wasn't working anymore. And I kept telling myself, I'm gonna just stop drinking, and that's it. And I tried for, probably a whole year to stop drinking. Then over the past maybe 6 months, I got to a point where I was like, why am I even trying to limit myself to one weekend day of drinking per month, and drinking like only 1 or 2 drinks if I'm still gonna feel shitty? So I finally, after there was this like tug at me for probably over a year, ever since Quinn was born, she's 3 years old, I realized that I don't handle alcohol the way that I used to. There was something tugging in the back of me that was like, you need to get this under control. You need to just like, you really need to stop. And so I kind of pushed that feeling away for a while. It wasn't until this pivotal event that I realized that I just need to absolutely stop drinking. So I have a video up on my channel. I don't want to go into the full details, but essentially it was Easter weekend. I had my mother-in-law in town and my brother-in-law in town, and we were celebrating Easter. We had so many fun things planned. We did a crawfish boil on Friday. We went out to dinner and we're drinking on Saturday, and then Sunday was Easter. And then on Monday, my kids were supposed to start a new daycare. So Sunday, I said to myself, it is a fun weekend. I, of course, am gonna drink. I was still at the point where I was only really drinking on occasions or if we went out with friends, and I felt this social pressure to drink. So Easter comes, and that Sunday, it just went downhill. So we started with mimosas in the morning, we switched over to Cosmos in the afternoon, and then after the kids went to bed, Pete got out the espresso martinis, and all hell just breaks loose when I have espresso martinis. For whatever reason, they are so addicting to me, and I can't just have one. And the combination of the alcohol and the espresso just really messes with me a lot, and the depression that I normally feel having a couple of drinks, multiply it by like 1,000 if I have an espresso martini. But at that point, the espresso martinis were flowing. I was drunk. I was like, I know I'm gonna have a hard day tomorrow, dropping the kids off at their new school, like whatever. Throw caution to the wind, and I drank, I don't know, however many espresso martinis, and went to bed at like 1 a.m. The next morning, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law were supposed to leave. They were supposed to get an Uber at like 5 a.m. and then go to the airport, and they missed their flight. And I woke up, I was having like heart palpitations. I was so anxious. I felt so bad. I felt so guilty about what I had done the night before. I couldn't believe that I drank so much, and then we had to take the kids to daycare. It was an absolute disaster. Quinn was just crying hysterically. She was like hyperventilating because she didn't want to go. And I don't know. It was just a perfect storm. And I came home from dropping them off at daycare. Pete stayed with me because I needed that like emotional support to drop them off. And I knew that it was going to be a tough day. We get home, it's like a black cloud. I go to my bed and I just start bawling, crying uncontrollably. Alcohol is definitely a factor. The emotional stress on me of dropping my daughter off and my son, who did fine, at the new school, and just feeling such like guilt about that as a mom. Like, am I doing the right thing for my child? Blah, blah, blah. Finally, everything ended up working out. We went and picked up the kids. We canceled that daycare. We brought them back to their other daycare. But that day, it was April 1st. It was April Fool's Day. I will never forget it. Something in me snapped. I said, this is not how I want to live my life anymore. I feel deep in my soul this like pull of, you need to stop drinking. Like, it was, and I had felt it before, but I brushed it off. But that day specifically, I was like, I felt almost like a peace within myself. I was like, I need to stop drinking. I need to stop. This is not serving me. I'm not having fun with it. I'm not drinking to get drunk. The social pressure is not worth it. If I lose friends, which I haven't, but if I lose friends, who cares? They're not for me. I have to stop. And cold turkey, I said, I'm done. And that was it. I haven't drank since. And after that moment, that peace and that calm that came over me, I don't know. It's something that stays within me. I don't want to drink. I don't want, even though I like the taste of alcohol, like that day and the culmination of all of those experiences after I drank and feeling so terrible and feeling depressed and just not like myself and being on this hamster wheel of drinking, you know, for a few hours, having that high and that relaxation for a few hours, to suffer for a few days was just so not worth it at all. So that's pretty much my story. I'm not an alcoholic. I think nowadays I have been doing so much research on the effects of drinking and what it can do to your body. And one of the most brilliant podcasts that I listened to was Andrew Huberman's podcast on what alcohol does to your body. I watched that. I think it's like 2 hours long or something like that. I watched that on YouTube pretty much the day after I decided on April 1st that I was not drinking. I started doing so much research on what alcohol does, and I essentially came to the conclusion that I was poisoning myself. I literally was poisoning myself by drinking alcohol, and there is no place for it in my life. I don't want my health to suffer. Oh my gosh, the eye-opening statistics and information in that Huberman podcast was alarming. And he was talking about like even a couple drinks a week are enough to disrupt your sleep, to damage the cells in your body, to damage your brain cells. It's enough to do significant damage. And I had been drinking for 20 years, since I was about 17, 20 years of pretty much poisoning myself. And it all just like was a light bulb, and I was done. I read a bunch of books. There's this one guy, I also was watching a lot of videos on YouTube. His name is Andy Ramage, and I love him because there's a lot of stuff that you can find on the internet about drinking and quitting drinking, but a good majority is related to if you have a problem, like a dependency on alcohol, or you abuse alcohol in some way, shape, or form, or you can't stop drinking, or, you know, something like that. And I really wasn't in that boat. So a lot of that content was good in the sense of like what it can do to your body and how it is addictive and all of that stuff. It's good to know. But this guy, Andy Ramage, he talked about how he was what he calls a middle lane drinker. And I think that's what the majority of people are. You don't have a problem. If you wanted to quit, you could. You don't wake up in the morning craving alcohol. Basically like you use it for social reasons. Maybe you like the taste, you're going out with your friends, you drink. Sometimes you drink more, sometimes you drink less, but that's kind of what he calls the middle lane drinker. And I was like, that is me. And he even went to the point, his story is really interesting. He was a broker, so it reminded me a lot of my husband, Pete, because Pete is also like a fuel broker, and he is heavily entrenched in an industry that is kind of like a good old boys club where a lot of the social activities are around drinking. And the way you build relationships is you take your customers out to happy hours, dinners, parties, like everything that involves alcohol. And this guy, Andy Ramage, was saying the same thing. He just talked about how after he stopped, he 10x'd his revenue from his business. He opened a new business. He did all of these things. He lost a ton of weight. He got in shape. He had a clear mind. He was getting up early in the morning. Like all of these really healthy changes. It was a catalyst. And so that just really resonated with me. And I spent probably the first 30 days of not drinking just researching, getting my hands around every book, YouTube video, podcast that I could that talked about drinking and why you shouldn't do it, why you should quit, and how much you can improve your life by not drinking. And I felt this deep in my soul, something was saying that you can do more, you can do better, and you need to let alcohol go so that you can accomplish your goals and be the best version of yourself. So that is my story. That's my why. Now I have been alcohol free for just about 60 days now. I have this app on my phone. It's just called Quit Drinking because I wanted to hold myself accountable and actually know how many days I have gone without drinking. So I have not been drinking for 65 days, 1 hour and 36 minutes and 22 seconds. And it's pretty cool. You can put goals in there. It also tells you how much money that you've saved. And mine is at $929. And that's probably true because I would go out almost every weekend and buy wine, or we would get cocktails when we were out to dinner and things like that. And I am going to continue this video and talk about my first 30 days of not drinking. I took so many notes. It was a really, really difficult month for me. And a lot of people say like, oh, you start feeling the effects of not drinking right away and you get better sleep and blah, blah. I had the complete opposite experience. I felt actually horrible for the first 30 days. And I wasn't even drinking that much. I'm telling, like, going back to like, I have been drinking maybe once a month, just eliminating that 2 to 4 drinks a month. It was horrible. Anyway, I'm gonna go into a video on that, but overall, right now, sitting at 65 days without drinking alcohol, I am feeling so wonderful. I have achieved so many milestones without drinking, and I think that, I'll talk more about this, but I think going to those big social occasions and not drinking, like I had my 37th birthday, and I didn't drink. My parents were in town, I didn't drink. I went to a wedding, I didn't drink. We just went to Galveston for Memorial Day weekend and we're with a whole bunch of couples with a ton of alcohol and I didn't drink. And I am going to continue this. I feel no desire to drink and I am just such a happier person without it in my life. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I am going to not drink for an entire year. So if you are anything like me and maybe you have cut down your drinking drastically, but you're still doing it occasionally and you want to just see what it feels like to get it out of your system, hey, let's start this journey and see where it goes. I will keep updating you monthly and share different things that start to crop up. I'm so excited to see just what my life and me as a person, what I look like a year from now after not drinking. I can't wait. So thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in hearing more about my journey, coming along with me on this journey of not drinking, then please subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.